Hello everyone and welcome to another most interesting game from round 1 of this year's Tata Steel Chess Tournament. It is the winner of the Tata Steel Chess Tournament 2022 edition, Jorden Foreest versus Alireza Firouzja. If you remember, it was a pretty crazy tournament where Magnus had a good run, but he lost to Yesipenko and then he ended up 1 point behind Jorden Foreest. But in the end, the tournament was tied between Jorden and Anish Giri. They went into tiebreaks, and after 2 games of tiebreaks, it was still a draw, and then Jorden was able to take down Anish in Armageddon. So he won very nicely, even though Anish almost won that one and he won the 2023 edition. But now he faces against a most devious opponent, Alireza Firouzja, also one of the participants of the 2024 Candidates Tournament. And yeah, it's a great matchup. It's a great fight. Let's see what happened here. So Jorden has the white pieces and he opened with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e6. Alireza goes for the French defense. Sorry about that. And Jorden strikes in the center with pawn to d4. We have pawn to d5 and knight to c3. And usually bishop to b4 is played here, and by usually I mean it is the most common move here, but knight to f6, the classical French, is also very much played. And now just bishop to g5, where you have two very good options. You could play bishop to e7, or you could capture on e4 right away. Sometimes h6 is played, and the difference is, for example, if you play bishop to e7, let's say something like e5, knight to e4, you can simply trade here, and then a trade occurs on e7, and it's a fine position. You can play this. But Alireza prefers a different line. D captures on e4, at least for this game. Knight captures on e4, and now bishop to e7, where you could capture with the bishop, which is by far the most popular option, or you could capture with the knight. These two are considered the most popular. Trying to keep a material on the board with knight to c3 hasn't been proven to be all that great for white. And the thing is, if you play bishop captures, then you go into the Morozevich line of this French setup where g captures on f6 is played, and this is very, very tricky. But it is the most common idea. However, Jorden decides to trade everything on f6. So knight captures, bishop captures, and queen captures. And now, as the d4 pawn is already attacked by the queen, you can't play something like queen to f3. So here we have knight to f3, castles by Alireza, and now queen to d3. Jorden announces that he will be castling queenside, bishop to d7, and now queen to e3, making room for the light core bishop on d4, but now the d4 pawn is nicely defended. So okay, knight to c6, and we have queenside castles. And now there is a game where knight to b4 was played, and knight to b4 is one of the top moves recommended by the engine, but Alireza goes for rook f to d8, and depending on how long you allow the engine to crunch the numbers, it will say either knight to b4 is the best or rook f to d8 is the best. And it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. So as we have castles on opposite sides of the board, of course you know that Jorden will try to play on the king side, whereas Alireza will try to attack on the queen side. And here we have pawn to c3. Of course you want to strengthen your d4 pawn, and Alireza immediately fights against that. Knight to e7. He makes room for the pawn to be pushed to c5, and the knight can be remaneuvered to d5 or f5 with tempo. Jorden's queen is on e3. So queen to e5, Jorden offers a queen trade, and now bishop to a4, attacking the rook. And now Alireza's idea is that if b3, then he can play something like bishop to c6, or maybe he even wouldn't play this, as you'll see what happened in the game. And now if queens get traded off, let's say captures, you don't want to have your pawn structure ruined, so let's say knight e1, and now b5, stopping pawn to c4, and you will have this backwards pawn on c3 that can later be attacked with knight to d5, and it will be maybe not a permanent weakness, but it will be a weakness for a very long time. So instead, Jorden goes rook to e1, and now queen to g6. Alireza stops the queen trade and threatens checkmate on c2. So how does Jorden stop this? Pawn to b3. We have bishop back to e8. Again, bishop to c6 seems to be the most logical move, just putting pressure on this diagonal. But Alireza plays queen to e8. I have no idea what the plan is. Probably it has been thoroughly analyzed that bishop to c6 doesn't really yield any advantage for black, so bishop to e8 is a long-term plan for Alireza. And okay, queen g5, again offering the queen trade, and now knight to d5, putting pressure on that c3 pawn. And now you have to decide how to deal with this. If you can play c4, that's going to be great for you, but if you play c4 now, then a queen trade happens, and after captures knight to b4, you have all sorts of weaknesses here. Your a2 pawn is attacked, the d4 pawn is attacked, and there's just no good way to tackle all of this. If you play pawn to a3, for example, then knight to c6, again puts pressure on your pawn. You can't advance it to d5, so it would be a pretty bad move. And if, of course, knight to f3, you can defend it once, but it's attacked twice. So that's kind of the idea here. So Jorden instead decides to trade first, queen captures, h captures, and just play king to b2. So he defends the pawn here, but now Alireza goes rook a to c8, and after bishop to c4, he strikes in the center with pawn to c5. D captures on c5 is played, rook captures on c5, and now rook to e5. Preventing the knight from moving, as the rook on c5 is undefended, but Alireza finds this beautiful pawn to b5 move. And now, how do you play this? The problem is, even though you don't really want to give up your bishop for knight, if you go back with something like bishop to e2, this c3 pawn is just weak, and it seems like you can't capture it right away, because if rook captures, then you capture on d5 and pick up the rook, and if the knight captures, of course, the rook hangs on c5, but there's this nasty f6 move. Attacks the rook, and now after rook captures here, you will be able to gobble up the c3 pawn. And okay, you can play something like rook to c1, but now pawn to b4. And okay, rook to a6 goes after the a7 pawn, but now g5 threatens g4 to kick away the knight and bring the rook over to d2. And if h3, you will play king to h7, even give up the a7 pawn, and now bishop to g6. And now look at this position. The bishop here, absolute monster. The knight on c3 is untouchable. The rook's controlling c and d file. This would be very hard to play with white. So instead, Jorden decides, okay, I can't really keep the bishop. I have to give up the bishop for knight. He plays bishop captures on d5. Rook c captures on d5. If anyone is listening, without watching, rook captures and rook captures on d5. And now just pawn to c4. Jorden gets rid of the weakness on c3 and advances the pawn. Also threatens to create a passed pawn. So b captures on c3, b captures, and now rook to f5. Alireza prevents the knight from moving, as the f2 pawn will fall, and he is looking forward to e4, e5, e4, kicking away the knight, and rook captures on f2. So how can Jorden fight against this? Well, rook to d1. He wants to bring the rook over to d8, and if Alireza gets too playful with the kingside pawns, then maybe he can just start advancing his own passed pawn to victory. King to f8, and now rook to d8. Alireza advances the pawn to e5. King to b3 now. We have pawn to e4, and now just knight to d2. So the king was moved, so rook captures on f2 does not pin the knight. And if Alireza captures on f2, Jorden will capture on e4. So king to e7 first, improving the position. Rook to a8, now threatening to pick up the a7 pawn with tempo. And Alireza plays this beautiful bishop to c6 move. Attacks the rook, and also says you can have the a7 pawn even with check. Okay, Jorden captures it. It's the best move. King to d6, and now rook to a6, pinning the bishop. Again, if rook captures on f2, knight can capture on e4 since the bishop is pinned, but king to c7. Alireza just nicely unpins, rook to a7 with check, and now king to d8. Also, the f7 pawn is defended, so you don't have to worry about that, and the e4 pawn is defended, so now Alireza is just threatening rook captures on f2, and then the e pawn becomes a passed pawn, and then all of the kingside pawns might fall as well. And here, if you play rook to a6, okay, let's say you try something like this, and then rook captures on f2, rook captures on c6, you will capture on d2, and the passed e pawn will just be winning. So instead, Jorden plays king to c3. You have to bring your king closer to the soon-to-be passed pawn, and now rook captures on f2. Knight to b3, preparing to bring the knight to d4, and Alireza plays pawn to e3. And this video will feature two pause the video moments. One of them starts now, because only one move here prevents Alireza from winning the game. So feel free to pause the video and try to find the only and absolute best move for Jorden while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding knight to d4, as that is the move Jorden played, but it is not the correct move that solves this position. The only way to solve this is king to d3. Yeah, you just bring the king closer and that's it. Seems like an easy thing to do, but not when you're playing Alireza. And it's not that it was time trouble or anything. Both of them had plenty of time. That's why I'm not mentioning the clocks. But the point is that now after you play e2, now you play king to d2. Of course, you stop promotion. And after bishop captures on g2, now you play play knight to d4. And you're not even in a rush to pick up the e2 pawn, you're just guarding the c6 square. You want to start advancing your own pawn. And now if, let's say, king to e8, c5, you will play bishop back to d5, and now pawn to c6, and now after you bring a queen into the game, doesn't really matter, rook will capture on a2. And of course, white does not want to trade. White will play something like rook b7, you bring the rook to a8, and you've rid yourself of this nuisance on e2 that was the passed pawn, and now you just start advancing your king, and well, all in all, it's a draw. Even something like this, let's say rook to a2 with check, king to e3, rook to e3 check, king to d2, and now you can even play bishop captures on c6 because the 3 pawns will be enough to just get a draw here. You will also eliminate the h2 pawn, so 3 pawns against 0 pawns will be sufficient compensation for the extra piece. But instead, Jorden played knight to d4 right away, and he missed one move that Alireza can play in order to make his position a winning one. So once again, feel free to pause the video and win the game now for Alireza while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on stopping king to d3, and the only way to do that successfully is to play bishop to e4. Especially congratulations if you didn't go for the pawn here. Bishop to e4 is the way to do it, as now the king is cut off from the d3 square and from the d2 square, and now the pawn is just unstoppable. Jorden started pushing his own passed pawn, but now Alireza just played rook to d2. Of course not e2. If you play e2, then king to d2 stops the pawn, but after rook to d2, there is no more moves that Jorden can play, and he was in this position on move 37 that Jorden van Foreest resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Problem is now that whatever you play, let's say you play pawn to c6, just rook captures on d4, and that's it. Once you capture the rook, e2, there's no stopping the pawn. White's own a2 pawn is in the way, and that's pretty much it. You can give a check, but it doesn't matter. There are no more checks, there are no more tricks. You can capture the bishop and then e1 queen with check, and you know, if something like this, you can easily pick up the rook, but you don't have to rush it. It's completely winning, as white has zero counterplay here. So yeah, very nicely played by both of them. Jorden really played well. He got rid of his c3 weakness, was able to advance it to c4. He played a great game, but he made one inaccuracy, or well, we can even call this a blunder that allowed Alireza to win the game. King to d3 was essential here. Once knight to d4 was played, it was all Alireza needed to take the win here. And against a player like Alireza, former 2800, one mistake is all it takes for him to win the game. So a great game by both of them, but it is Alireza who is triumphant here, and with the black pieces no less. And for those of you who haven't seen the previous videos from round 1, I will mention some of the pairings and the standings. So currently we have Jan Nepomniachtchi on 1 point, who defeated Max Varmerdam, Alireza on 1 point, who defeated Jorden, Anish Giri defeated Women's World Champion Ju Wenjun, and Wei Yi, who defeated Alexander Donchenko. With half a point, we have Ding Liren, Maksudlu, Abdusattorov, and Pragnananda, Vidit Gujarati, and Gukesh. And for the moment on 0 points, Jorden van Foreest, Alexander Donchenko, Max Varmerdam, and Ju Wenjun. And the pairings for round 2 are as follows. Abdusattorov will face Pragnananda, Jan Nepomniachtchi will face Ju Wenjun, Anish Giri will face Vidit, Wei Yi will face Gukesh, Alireza will face Parham Maksudlu, Ding Liren will face Donchenko, and Jorden van Foreest will face Max Varmerdam. So those are the round 2 pairings. So we'll check out the most interesting one, and as usual, I'm very much looking forward to your hashtag suggestion for what games to follow, and also if you have any nice games from the challengers section, also use hashtag suggestion, and I will do my best to take a look at those. Maybe if the round will not be so interesting in the master section, or maybe even Tata Steel Masters is finished, then I will check out some of the games from the challenger section. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely done by Alireza. You know, as we've expected from a candidate. I would like to thank Welsh Fan, Mark Henley Brennan, Michael Males, Frank Banner, and Best Content Maker for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. Really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.